It was one of the most astonishing discoveries in human history. Beneath the scorching sands of Iraq, archaeologists uncovered a tomb untouched for thousands of years. Inside rested a massive skeleton, far larger than any known human. But the real shock came when scientists analyzed the DNA. The results revealed a genetic structure unlike anything found on Earth. It belonged to a being long thought to be myth, the legendary Anunnaki King of ancient Sumerian texts. This discovery has the potential to rewrite everything we know about human origins, ancient civilizations, and our place in the universe. The secret tomb beneath the Iraqi sands. In 2000, a team of German archaeologists, led by Dr. Jörg Fastbender, received a rare permission to enter a remote area of southern Iraq. Their destination lay deep within the arid plains near the ancient ruins of Uruk, one of the oldest known cities in human history. Uruk had long been considered a cornerstone of early civilization, a place tied to the very origins of writing, architecture, and centralized governance. After several weeks of intense labor, spent beneath the unforgiving desert sun and under constant surveillance from local militia forces, the team made a shocking discovery. Hidden beneath layers of hardened sand and crumbling sediment, they unearthed what appeared to be a large stone structure. It was completely sealed and had remained undisturbed for what appeared to be thousands of years. The entrance was blocked by a slab of granite, which bore strange engravings. Some resembled early forms of Sumerian cuneiform, but many of the glyphs were unfamiliar, written in a language that none of the experts on site could confidently identify. Once the chamber was opened, the team stepped into a perfectly preserved tomb. The air inside was dry and heavy, untouched by time. In the center of the stone chamber lay a colossal humanoid skeleton, stretched out across a carved stone platform. It reportedly measured over 12 feet in length. The bones were incredibly thick, far denser than those of a modern human. Its arms and legs were unusually long and proportionally different from anything in the human evolutionary record. Most disturbing was the skull. It was massive, with a pronounced forehead and deep ridges that ran along the crown and down the sides. The eye sockets were larger than normal and angled in a way that gave the face a strange, almost alien appearance. The level of preservation was beyond anything the team had ever seen. The bones were not fossilized, nor were they deteriorating in any visible way. It was as if the tomb had been built not just to preserve the body, but to hide it, deliberately and carefully. The structure was lined with smooth stone walls covered in a combination of Sumerian and unknown inscriptions. Several repeating symbols appeared throughout the room. These matched motifs found in ancient Mesopotamian religious texts, particularly those that referenced the Anunnaki, the so-called sky gods, said to have descended from the heavens and lived among early humans. The discovery sent a wave of quiet panic through the team. None of them had expected to find anything close to this. Most had come expecting old pottery shards or broken tablets. Instead, they were standing face to face with something that should not have existed. Despite the overwhelming mystery, the skeleton was carefully removed and transported to a private laboratory facility for genetic analysis. What the scientists discovered during testing did not simply challenge existing scientific models. It shook them to the core. It was not just mysterious, it was terrifying. The DNA results that shouldn't exist. The skeleton was transported under strict secrecy to a high-security laboratory in Europe. The team assigned to study it included top experts in genetics, biology, anthropology, and ancient history. These were professionals who had spent their careers working with ancient human remains. But none of them had ever encountered anything like this. The body was incredibly well preserved, almost too well. Despite being buried for thousands of years, the bones were nearly perfect. There were no signs of the usual decay that happens to bodies over time. Something about this tomb, or perhaps the body itself, had resisted the effects of time. Once the team began extracting DNA samples from the bones, the project followed standard procedures until the test results came back. At first, parts of the DNA seemed normal, showing markers found in ancient human populations from Mesopotamia. But then came a shock. Large parts of the genetic material didn't match anything known to science. These segments weren't just rare or mutated versions of human DNA. They were not found in any known species, living or extinct. One of the lead scientists stared at the results in disbelief. He didn't speak for several minutes. Then he quietly said, "This is terrifying." He wasn't being dramatic. What he was seeing was something that, according to modern science, should not exist. Some parts of the DNA followed unusual, repeating patterns that looked more like something designed intentionally than something that evolved naturally. Even stranger, the team discovered a rare type of DNA structure they had only read about in theory. Most DNA forms a double helix, which is two spiraling strands connected together. But this DNA showed signs of a triple helix structure, something that has never been found in nature. This kind of structure has only been proposed in advanced scientific models, and only as a possibility. Yet here it was, in front of them. As the scientists kept digging through the data, they realized the structure of the DNA was too organized. The sequences of genetic letters, A, T, C, and G, weren't random, like what you'd expect in natural evolution. Instead, they repeated in exact patterns, almost like a language or computer code. Some sequences even mirrored the number systems used in ancient Sumerian mathematics. The deeper they looked, the more it seemed like the DNA had been engineered. When word of this discovery began to leak into private scientific circles, it caused immediate uproar. No one could explain how such DNA could exist. Independent researchers who reviewed fragments of the data noticed something even more disturbing. Certain patterns in the genetic code looked familiar, not biologically but symbolically. The shapes and sequences matched the strange symbols found on ancient Sumerian carvings and tablets. These were the same tablets that spoke of the Anunnaki, the so-called sky gods who came down to Earth in ancient times. That's when the name Anunnaki began appearing in discussions about the DNA as a possible explanation. The physical features of the skeleton, its massive size, unusual skull shape, and other inhuman characteristics already didn't fit the profile of a normal human. Now the DNA was pointing in the same direction. The sequences seemed designed, not evolved. They matched ancient symbols tied to the Anunnaki, and those symbols were often associated with one being above all others, the great sky king Anu, the father of the Anunnaki. For many scientists, this was too much to believe, but for others, it opened a door they never thought they'd walk through. If the DNA was real, and all evidence said it was then, this was the first physical proof of the Anunnaki ever found. Still, one question remained unanswered. Who was the individual buried in that tomb? Who had DNA that was part human and part something else entirely? The location of the tomb, the preserved state of the body, and the overwhelming signs of intentional design all led to one name that kept coming up in ancient texts from the city of Uruk. The man they were now beginning to suspect was not only real, but may have been part god, and his name was Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh, the demigod of Uruk. The location of the tomb near the ancient ruins of Uruk immediately raised eyebrows. The design of the burial chamber, the unnatural preservation of the remains, and the strange symbols etched into the surrounding stone all suggested this was not an ordinary grave. For many archaeologists and historians, one overwhelming question rose to the surface. Had they found the final resting place of Gilgamesh? Gilgamesh is more than a myth. He is one of the first recorded kings in human history, mentioned not only in the Epic of Gilgamesh, the world's oldest surviving written story, but also in ancient Sumerian king lists and temple inscriptions. These texts describe him as a ruler of Uruk around 2700 BCE, but they go even further. Gilgamesh was said to be 2/3 divine and only 1/3 human, a statement that scholars have long debated. But if taken literally, it implies something deeply extraordinary, that his bloodline included a direct genetic connection to the gods. In Sumerian cosmology, the gods were not distant or abstract. They had names, ranks, and territories. At the top stood Anu, the sky god and supreme ruler of the Anunnaki. It was Anu who granted kingship to mortals, and in several inscriptions, divine favor from Anu is said to run through the veins of rulers chosen to lead humanity. If Gilgamesh was indeed 2/3 divine, then Anu, or one of his direct celestial offspring, would have had to play a role in his creation. That would make Gilgamesh not just a powerful king, but a biological descendant of the Anunnaki royal bloodline. The DNA findings recovered from the tomb revealed unusual genetic structures that no known species on Earth could explain. Scientists were stunned to find that approximately 1/5 of the genetic code appeared to be artificially engineered, displaying patterns that matched no natural evolutionary process. When this was compared to encoded astronomical and numeric systems found in Sumerian texts associated with Anu and the Anunnaki, the connection became impossible to ignore. Suddenly, the description of Gilgamesh as part god no longer seemed poetic, it seemed literal. If this was his tomb, then the stories of his immense strength, unnatural height, and tireless quest for immortality may have been rooted in truth. And if his divine lineage led back to Anu, then this discovery did more than validate an ancient legend. It uncovered a direct link between humanity's earliest kings and a race of beings that, according to Sumerian tradition, came from the stars. And if Gilgamesh truly was a hybrid, then the question that followed is both simple and deeply unsettling. A hybrid of what? That question would open the door to even older, more forbidden legends. The Nephilim connection. The ancient Hebrew scriptures, particularly the book of Genesis, describe a mysterious and troubling group known as the Nephilim. These beings were portrayed as giants, towering in size, unmatched in strength, and feared as violent warriors. The text says they were born when the sons of God took mortal women, the daughters of men, as their partners. From this unnatural union came the Nephilim, who brought destruction and chaos wherever they appeared. They were not viewed as simply large or powerful humans. They were considered dangerous hybrids, whose very existence unsettled the balance of the world. Their rise is linked directly to one of the most dramatic events in the Bible, the Great Flood. According to Genesis, their violence and corruption grew so severe that the earth was filled with bloodshed. The Nephilim became a symbol of this corruption, and God responded by cleansing the world with the flood, wiping away the tainted lineage in an attempt to restore purity to humanity. This was not just punishment, but a reset, a way to erase the presence of beings who were never meant to exist. For centuries, scholars and theologians have debated the true meaning of these passages. Some insist the Nephilim are only stories meant to warn about human weakness and divine rebellion. Others, however, argue the texts are describing real beings who once lived. They point to the persistence of giant legends across cultures, Norse myths of frost giants, Greek tales of the Gigantes, Mesoamerican stories of enormous gods, and African traditions of sky-born warriors. These similarities suggest the Nephilim story might be part of a global memory, different cultures preserving fragments of the same ancient truth. This is where the discovery in Iraq takes on new meaning. The skeleton's size, unusual bone structure, and the strange DNA sequences all align eerily well with the biblical description of the Nephilim. And when combined with Sumerian records that described Gilgamesh as two-thirds divine, a chilling possibility emerges. If the Anunnaki were the sons of God, then Gilgamesh, born of a mortal queen and a divine being, fits the definition of Nephilim exactly. His genetic code, part human and part engineered other, makes him more than a legendary king. It makes him a living link between the Hebrew accounts of hybrids and the Sumerian tradition of the Anunnaki. If this connection is true, then the Nephilim may not be myths or allegories. They could be real, and their origin might not be of natural evolution, but intervention from above. Which leaves one question: who were the beings powerful enough to alter humanity's bloodline? The answer points directly back to the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki, gods or visitors. The Anunnaki are described in ancient Sumerian, Babylonian, and Akkadian texts as powerful gods who descended from the heavens. These beings were believed to have arrived on Earth in a distant age, and the stories left by early civilizations credit them with shaping the very foundations of human society. They were remembered not only as bringers of wisdom, but also as the originators of civilization. Writing, farming, law, and even the institution of kingship were all described as gifts from the Anunnaki to mankind. The way these records portray them is striking. The Anunnaki were not presented as vague symbols of nature or imagination, but as real beings with presence and authority. In the texts, they appear advanced, commanding, and separate from humans in both power and knowledge. They were described as descending from the skies or living in distant realms above the earth, and their influence over humanity was constant and deliberate. To the people of Mesopotamia, the Anunnaki were not distant ideals. They were leaders, rulers, and creators whose actions directly affected the course of human history. Traditional historians have usually taken a symbolic view of these stories. They argue that the Anunnaki were literary creations that represented natural forces, divine order, or celestial bodies. Yet not all researchers agree. In alternative and fringe studies, a different theory has taken hold. According to this view, the Anunnaki were not abstract gods, but actual visitors who came from beyond our world. Their descent from the heavens was not simply poetic, but a literal description of their arrival. If this is true, then the earliest written accounts of humanity may not be myths at all, but memories of real encounters that took place long before recorded history began. One phrase appears again and again in the cuneiform tablets. The Anunnaki are called those who from the heavens came down. Mainstream scholars read this as metaphor, but others argue it could be a direct record of an ancient landing. These beings may have brought with them the tools and knowledge that sparked civilization on Earth. If that is the case, then humanity's sudden rise was not the result of slow progress alone, but of outside influence. Sumerian creation myths also tell of the Anunnaki shaping mankind. They are said to have mixed their essence with clay to form the first humans. Most historians view this as symbolic storytelling, yet some suggest that clay refers to early human beings, while essence is a description of genetic material. In that interpretation, the myth is not about molding clay, but about altering DNA. This possibility becomes far more troubling in light of the discovery in Iraq. The strange skeleton and its DNA, filled with sequences foreign to Earth, may represent the first physical evidence of Anunnaki blood. If so, it is not just a story, it could be proof of intentional design. This theory gained momentum when researchers began comparing other ancient cultures and found striking similarities. The global footprint of giants. The tomb in Iraq was not the only clue. For more than 5 centuries, reports of giant human-like beings have surfaced in archaeological digs, newspaper articles, and oral traditions around the world. In the 1520s, during his circumnavigation of the globe, Ferdinand Magellan's crew made landfall in what is now known as Patagonia, Argentina. They documented encounters with indigenous people who reportedly stood nearly twice their height. Later explorers, including Sir Francis Drake and Anthony Knivet, described similar encounters with unnaturally tall natives in the region. Though modern historians often consider these accounts exaggerated, the consistency across multiple voyages raises questions. In the 1800s, North America became the site of dozens of reported giant skeleton discoveries. In 1877, workers digging near Maple Creek, Wisconsin, claimed to find 7 skeletons, each standing between 7 and 9 feet tall. In 1883, the Smithsonian documented a discovery in Kanawha County, West Virginia. Skeletons measuring over 8 feet tall were reportedly unearthed from burial mounds, accompanied by copper bracelets, stone tools, and inscribed tablets. Similar stories emerged from Ohio, Tennessee, and Illinois throughout the late 19th century. While most of these accounts were eventually dismissed, original records and news clippings still exist in archives, suggesting they were taken seriously at the time. In 1911, in Lovelock Cave, Nevada, archaeologists working with miners uncovered over 10,000 artifacts, including unusually large bones and a pair of 15-inch-long sandals. These discoveries seemed to confirm the oral history of the Paiute people, who had passed down legends of red-haired, cannibalistic giants called the Siteka. According to the stories, the giants were ultimately trapped and burned inside the cave by the surrounding tribes. Despite the physical evidence and detailed native accounts, mainstream archaeologists offered little attention. Between 1919 and 1928, Ralph Glidden, an amateur archaeologist, conducted a series of digs on Santa Catalina Island, part of the Channel Islands off the coast of California. He claimed to have found over 3,000 skeletons, some measuring between 7 and 9 feet in height. Glidden documented his work with photographs and handwritten notes. At the time, professional scholars dismissed him as a sensationalist. However, Decades later, independent documentation surfaced from other excavations in the area, supporting Gliddon's claims of abnormally large remains. In 1964, in Loja Province, Ecuador, Father Carlos Vaca, a Catholic priest and amateur archaeologist, uncovered a collection of massive bone fragments with the help of local residents. The bones appeared to be of biological origin and belonged to beings estimated to be over 10 feet tall. They were displayed for a time in a small museum before mysteriously vanishing. Photographs and some remaining fragments still exist and have been examined by independent researchers, though no official classification has been made. In 1974, a group of Sardinian farmers stumbled upon stone fragments while plowing fields near Monte Prama, Italy. Over the following decades, archaeologists excavated more than 40 statues, now known as the Monte Prama giants, standing between 7 and 8.5 feet tall. These statues were placed directly above an ancient necropolis. For years, experts believed the figures were stylized representations of warriors. More recent studies suggest they may have been modeled after real people, possibly elite members of an unusually tall social class. In 2016, archaeologists in Shandong Province, China, made a surprising discovery. While excavating a 5,000-year-old Neolithic site, they uncovered a number of human skeletons, measuring over 6 feet 2 inches tall. This was far above the average height for that period. Chinese researchers attributed the stature to diet and genetics, but others have questioned whether these individuals may have belonged to a distinct and now extinct group of ancient humans with exceptional size. Taken one by one, these findings may appear disconnected or anecdotal, but together they form a compelling timeline. From the earliest European explorers to modern archaeological digs, reports of unusually large human-like beings have persisted across centuries and continents. Bones, artifacts, statues, and oral histories all seem to point to the same question. And now, with renewed interest in ancient DNA, particularly the mysterious and controversial topic of Anunnaki DNA, many of these long-ignored discoveries are being re-examined. With modern tools and less institutional resistance, researchers are returning to the field with open minds and new questions. Could these giants have truly existed? If so, who were they? Where did they come from? And more importantly, if giants once walked the earth, why did they vanish? Erased from history or still among us? Throughout history, legends of giants always end the same way. They rise in great power, only to fall in chaos and destruction. The Bible describes a great flood sent to wipe out the Nephilim, a race of giant beings born from the union of angels and humans. In Greek mythology, the Gigantomachy tells of a violent war in which the Olympian gods battled and defeated the Gigantes. Similar myths are found in the ancient cultures of Mesoamerica, Africa, Asia, and Northern Europe. Again and again, giants emerge, and then they vanish, leaving behind only myth, ruins, and unanswered questions. But what really happened to them? Some scholars suggest the giants did not disappear suddenly. Instead, they believe the giants may have slowly faded from existence through generations of interbreeding with humans. Over time, their distinct traits could have been diluted until their bloodlines were no longer recognizable. According to this theory, the giants did not die out, they simply became part of us. However, others believe something more deliberate occurred. A growing number of researchers argue that the giants may have been targeted. In this view, early human civilizations, or perhaps something even older, took action to eliminate them. Some theories suggest the giants were seen as a threat to human survival. Others propose that a powerful force set out to erase all trace of their existence. Whether it happened through war, disease, or systematic extermination, the result was the same. The giants disappeared, and most evidence of them was either buried or destroyed. Now, that buried history may finally be cracking open. With the alleged DNA of an Anunnaki king now in their possession, scientists may have uncovered something that could change everything we know about human origins. And this discovery has not gone unnoticed. Behind the scenes, the development is reportedly closely monitored by intelligence agencies, military groups, and religious organizations. They are not only interested in the science of the shocking discovery, they are concerned about the consequences. If the genetic material truly comes from a being with origins beyond Earth, then this is no longer just a matter of archaeology. It becomes a global issue that challenges everything from evolutionary science to theology. This leads to a question far more unsettling than many are prepared to face. Are human beings the result of natural evolution, shaped solely by time, biology, and chance? Or were we created, altered, or guided by an ancient intelligence not of this world? The secrets hidden within that Iraqi tomb may hold the key. They could rewrite the timeline of human civilization. They could challenge deeply held beliefs, overturn established science, and reveal a truth that has been buried for thousands of years. But the real question is not what the truth is. The real question is whether the world is ready to hear it. What do you think about this discovery? Feel free to share your comments with us in the comments section. Thanks for watching. See you in the